So today he's here to talk with us about his career transition, his journey from Fortune 10 company to startup to starting his very own company. So please join me as we give a very warm welcome to Dr.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to be back on the Duke campus, speaking in front of students of the MEM program. So today I'm here to speak to you about my journey through these career transitions from a Fortune 10 company, that's Ford Motor Company, to a startup, which is Organic Transit, to starting my own company. And my hope is that through the experiences that I will share with you, you will find them useful as you embark on your own careers after you graduate from this program. So as I was reflecting on my career, I wanted to speak to you first about my education because that has formed the foundation of my career so far. As Dr. Murray mentioned, I spent a lot of time at Ford Motor Company, so I wanted to share with you some of the highlights of my career there. And I've broken them into three areas. Because you are engineering management students, I thought I would give you some examples of projects that I've done that are focused on engineering, engineering management, and business. Then I'll speak about my transitions from Ford to Organic Transit and then to my own company, Engineering Innovation. Some of you may be interested in a career in consulting, either for a large company like McKinsey or Bain, or for a boutique consulting company, or even your own company. So I thought I would share with you some of what I've learned as a consultant over the past few months. And then at the end, I will bring it all together in one slide, where I will compare what it is to work in a large company, a startup, and working for your own self. And we'll see some pros and cons of everything. Just like in life, there is no one right answer. And then at the end, we should have a lot of time for Q&A. So starting with my education, this is a pretty full chart, so I like to be in school. You can say that. My bachelor's is from the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi, where I obtained my degree in mechanical engineering. I graduated at the top of my class there. And the reason I mention that point is that academic excellence has always been important to me. I like learning new things and mastering new concepts. The interesting question to ask is, does academic excellence necessarily translate into excellence in the workplace? And that's a question we can explore if you're interested in the Q&A section. While growing up in India, I was very aware of the harmful impact of air pollution. And I wanted to understand what to do to eliminate it and to understand it. So I actually wanted to specialize in the thermal sciences, especially combustion. And like most students in my class at IIT, when I graduated, I wanted to come to the States to pursue graduate studies. And I got accepted at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where I did my master's under an applied mathematician. We actually studied how flames grow in microgravity. It was very interesting work, very fundamental, but I wanted to actually do more applied research. So I changed advisors from the applied mathematician to a professor in mechanical engineering who was doing research in IC engines, internal combustion engines. And a semester after I started working for him, he moved to the University of Michigan. So I moved with him and finished my PhD at U of M. Through the recommendations of a professor who I had taken a class with and wrote a few papers with, I got invited to an interview at Ford's research labs right as I was graduating, and I was able to impress them enough for them to offer me a position there. And I stayed there for many years afterwards. During this time, I also realized that I needed to understand how business worked. My training so far had been as an engineer, but I felt that to be successful in developing new technologies, which is what my passion was, I wanted to not only understand business, but actually to speak the language of business fluently. And that's the reason I enrolled in the MBA program, the executive MBA program at the University of Michigan. So I was actually studying while I was working full-time. So I had 2 full-time jobs at that time. But the MBA was invaluable, as you will see in subsequent slides. So just the gist of my career at Ford. As I said, I started there in the research labs, right after graduating with my PhD. And I spent 15 years there. The research lab went through a lot of transformation over these years and eventually is now called the Research and Advanced Engineering Organization. In my last year at Ford, I moved to the Electrified Powertrain Engineering Organization. This is the organization that develops the next generation of Ford's electrified vehicles, full hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery electric vehicles. I left Ford in 2014 to join Organic Transit, which is a startup just 3 miles from here, based in downtown Durham. And then a year later, I left Organic Transit to start my own consulting practice, Engineering Innovation. So as I've spent a considerable amount of time at Ford, and most of you are engineers by training, I thought I would spend some time sharing with you some of the highlights of my career at Ford. And as I had mentioned before, I have broken it into 3 sections. Engineering, I'll speak about Six Sigma and systems engineering. Engineering management, Ford's global technology development system, and one example of an advanced powertrain project that I led. And then within business, a very sophisticated tool that we developed for multi-attribute optimization and strategy for the next generation of Ford's electrified vehicles. And as you will see that this sort of demarcation is quite artificial. There's a lot of overlap between engineering management, and business. And you really can't be successful in developing new technologies if you're focused only on one area out of these. So let's speak about engineering management and engineering for the next few slides. How many of you have heard of Six Sigma? Very good. So Six Sigma, as you probably know, is a methodology. It's a structured, data-driven methodology to remove defects in the manufacturing process. It starts, and the name Six Sigma comes from the idea that the process variability is so small that you can fit 6 standard deviations between the mean and the closest specification limit. And that's a very, very stringent standard to meet. It basically means if you're successful that you would only have 3.4 defects out of 1 million opportunities for defects. The reason why companies go for Six Sigma level of quality is that, for example, a company like Ford, which sells several million vehicles every year globally, if it has defects that are in the hundreds of thousands, the company will go bankrupt fixing these issues, not to talk about customer satisfaction issues. So any company that makes things in mass production way tries its best to reduce the variability in its manufacturing process. Six Sigma came out of Motorola in the 1980s, and GE was the first company that actually embraced it in a big way and used it to reduce variability in every aspect of its business, not just manufacturing, but also finance, customer service, etc. Ford adopted it in 2001, and I was among the first wave of what's called black belts that were trained in this methodology. So there are 2 flavors of Six Sigma. The first one is called DMAIC, D-M-A-I-C. The acronym stands for the 5 steps that you go through, and this is focused on reducing variability in any kind of manufacturing process. The first step is define, which essentially you're answering 2 questions. What is the problem and why is it a problem? And define is in many ways the most important step because a lot of projects fail because they've not done a good job of scoping what they're trying to do. There's a term they use in Six Sigma called boiling the ocean, which means you take on too much to do and then eventually you're not very successful in achieving your goals. So once you define the problem, you go into what's called the measure phase, where you establish confidence in your measurement system using a statistical process called GAGE RNR. RNR stands for repeatability and reproducibility. The reason we do it is if you don't have confidence in your measurement system, how will you know that you've made a difference? So for example, if I'm here and I want to be here, and I take a data point that says I'm here, but the variability in my measurement system is greater than the difference that I have made, I might as well be actually measuring the previous process because I won't know if I've statistically made a difference. So it's really important to have confidence in your measurement system before you actually even take data. Then, once you have established that, you go through the analyze phase, which is when you start establishing relationships between outputs and inputs. Once you've understood which inputs are the critical ones that affect your outputs, you use tools like design of experiments to figure out the optimal values of those inputs, which will get you the outputs that you want. And once you've done that, then you go through the control phase, which means that you institute processes in place that will ensure that your inputs stay at the level where you want them to be in a production environment. And you use things like control charting, etc. for that. So that's the DMAIC flavor. What's actually much more interesting for us as engineers is what's called DFSS, Design for Six Sigma, where instead of reactively trying to understand process variability and eliminate it, you actually design variability out of your design. So you actually do your design in a way that it is insensitive to variability in your input factors. And the way to do it is by, again, defining the problem that you're trying to study, characterizing the relationship between inputs and outputs, using tools like response surface methods, where you create surfaces where you figure out what the output looks like as a function of input, and then looking for spaces in your design where the output is least sensitive to variability in inputs. That's where your design will be robust. And then you verify your design by building prototypes at the appropriate level. So that's really Six Sigma. It's a very useful methodology for thinking also. It's not just a tool that you solve in a manufacturing environment or in an R&D lab. It's actually a very good way of systematically thinking through problem solving. Another tool that I feel, and actually I think my personal view is that this is the most important methodology that an engineer can learn is systems engineering. Especially in today's world when we are developing more and more complex systems every day, it's really important to have a methodology that allows you to systematically understand the interactions between or among the several elements of a system. So the formal definition of systems engineering is that it is an interdisciplinary approach and means. So it's not just one engineering or one part of engineering, it's interdisciplinary that is to enable the realization of successful systems. It focuses on defining customer needs and requirements, required functionality early. So note these themes. You'll see them coming again and again in the different things that we did at Ford. Defining customer needs and requirements early in the development cycle, documenting them, and then proceeding with design synthesis and design validation while considering the complete problem. So there's many ways to operationalize the idea of systems engineering. What we use at Ford is called the systems V process, where it looks like a V, where on the left side of the V, you cascade requirements from the top, from the customer, to the vehicle, and then down to the lowest level of your system. And then on the right side, you validate your design as you are synthesizing it from the bottom level to the top. So let me give you an example. Let's say you want to design a new car that gets you 60 miles per gallon, and you want it to run on gasoline. So you go out and you ask customers, what would they want? Fuel economy is just one aspect. What are the other priorities that they have? What are the objectives of the company? Where would it like to sell this vehicle? And then what are regulatory requirements, which are also essential, especially in the automobile. You have to meet safety, you have to meet emissions and all kinds of requirements. So together, these form high-level vehicle requirements, which are then cascaded to each individual system in the vehicle. So typically, there are 5 systems that comprise a car. There's powertrain, there's chassis, body, electrical, and climate control. So each of these systems will get its own requirements cascaded from the top. And then each of them will have their own subsystems and parts which will get their own requirements cascaded to them. The goal of the synthesis is that there's a lot of give and take. For example, if you want to achieve 60 miles per gallon, you can't ask the powertrain, which is the engine, to do all the work. Maybe the body team has to step up and reduce the weight of the vehicle. But you can't compromise on other things like crash safety that the government wants you to meet. So there's a lot of give and take, and that's the reason for this double-headed arrow on the left side, which means that we are going back and forth, cascading requirements from the top to the bottom. But once we have agreed on the requirements, then it's, in theory, a simple manner of integrating them on the right side of the V. The point is that the end, when you reach the top of the right side, you have attributes that you're verifying that meet the requirements that you started with. So that's the whole idea of systems engineering. Another thing we did was to take this idea of systems engineering further to create Ford's technology development system. And this was based on the fundamental idea that the number of failure modes in any new technology are fixed. It's up to you to decide when to find and fix them. The typical state is that as you, on the x-axis is time, as you start developing a new technology, you start finding failure modes late, because you have then, when you start building the hardware, you start testing it out, then you start finding failures. Well, they're easy to find then, but they're extremely hard to fix later in the design process, because you have already started to make the design much more concrete. So the countermeasures for the failure modes are going to be extremely disruptive and costly and difficult to implement the later you find them in the design process. The cardinal thing you can do is to wait for your customers to find failure modes for you, which is not something any company should ever strive to do. But it happens, because the more you let failure modes escape, the more likely it is that they will end up with your customers to find for you. The ideal state would be to flip this, which is to then say, I will do whatever I can to find failure modes early, which is easy to say, but extremely hard to do. Finding failure modes early means that you have to have a very, very good understanding of the physics of your problem, of the engineering, and of your customer requirements, because all this influences the design, and if you don't have all of that, you will not be able to find failure modes early. So it's actually a lot about cultural change. In a lot of companies, research, it does not get the number of resources that it should, whereas companies send armies to launch a new vehicle, because they have to fix problems later when the vehicle is being launched. But if we flip this and actually provide adequate resources in the research and advance in the early parts of development of a new product, then we won't have to send a whole lot of people to launch new products. Two quotes that I wanted to share with you as we were developing the system, we came across. One is from Richard Feynman, which was the last sentence of the commentary he wrote on the Challenger disaster, which was actually just 30 years ago yesterday. It happened. And he cautioned that for a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled. And this is something that we should all keep in mind and be humble about as we do new technology development, that we cannot fool nature. And the other quote that we liked was from Ralph Waldo Emerson, the 19th century poet and essayist, that every excess causes a defect and every defect an excess. So the idea is that you need to be balanced in how you do new technology development. The other realization that we had as we were developing the technology development system was that there were three types of failure modes. As engineers, we mainly focus on technical failure modes. We worry about functionality, we worry about robustness, we want to make sure that our design will survive under all the use cases that it will see in the field. But what really stymies new technology development are the business and project management related failure modes. And which was one of the main reasons why I went on to do my MBA afterwards, was because, and we actually surveyed projects that had failed at Ford, and we found that more than 80% had failed for business reasons, not for technical reasons. And business basically means not understanding the value proposition of a new technology early. It's extremely difficult to be able to quantify it and then communicate it in a way that your stakeholders will understand and agree with. And this is true whether you're developing new technology within a big company or you are an entrepreneur that has a new idea that you're trying to convince investors to invest in. Understanding the value that you bring to the table and communicating it in a way that people understand is really critical. And then project management is also very important because you have limited resources. You need to employ them in the most efficient manner by keeping your project on budget and on time. This is one example, actually, of a real. So the things that I've spoken about so far are more processes and methodologies, which are great, but they're only a means to an end. The end is actually a product that you're making to make people's lives better. And a project that I led at Ford was called the dual fuel engine. So we all know engines, and we basically drive in cars that run on one fuel. But what if you had two fuels on board, and you can use them as desired based on how you were running your vehicle? So this was a project in which we had gasoline, regular pump gasoline, and E85. So E85 is ethanol, and a mixture of ethanol and gasoline, which is 85% ethanol and 15% gasoline. So the reason we had both the fuels is because they have very different properties. Gasoline was the main fuel, and it has very high heating value. So it packs a lot of energy per volume of the fuel. E85 has a very high heat of vaporization and very high inherent octane rating, meaning it's a very good fuel to use when you're running the engine extremely hot or under very high load conditions. But it has 30% lower volumetric calorific value, which means that you want to minimize its use. So if you have both fuels, you run the car primarily on gasoline and then inject ethanol only when you need it, then you can really improve the efficiency of your vehicle by designing the engine with a very high compression ratio and very high boost. Compression ratio gives you efficiency, boost gives you power, both of which, and torque and power, both of which are really desirable from a customer's point of view. So what we found in this was that we could do this, and we showed that this technology worked, and we actually got diesel engine-like efficiencies out of it, which is a great feat. Gasoline, for an engine running primarily on gasoline, to get diesel-like efficiencies is a great feat. The challenge we had in this project was business. Convincing customers to fill two fuels in a car is not easy. So we actually have some invention disclosures that we worked with a major fuel company or oil company to come up with ways which with one nozzle you could fill two fuels, but there are cost issues and other things. So this just gives you a flavor of a technology that you can technically do, but getting it out into the field becomes a challenge. So next two examples are about business. So this is after I had completed my MBA. I was very keen to use my newly acquired knowledge of business to help the company move forward. So one example was creation or development of a sophisticated multi-attribute optimization tool. So Ford is a global company with multiple vehicles, multiple geographies, multiple everything. So how does a company like that optimize its resources? How does it make choices that would allow it to be profitable while meeting the requirements of customers that it serves in countries around the world? And again, like systems engineering, we start with customer wants at the top. Customers have preferences about the size of the vehicle, what performance attributes they would like, 0 to 60, for example, time, fuel economy that they would like, comfort levels, etc. Then there are regulatory requirements like safety, emissions, fuel economy, and taxation. In some ways, regulatory requirements are also a reflection of customer wants. Customers vote through their wallets as well as through the ballot. Through the wallets, they will spend money to buy what you're selling. Through the ballot, they will elect politicians or lawmakers who will make laws that customers care about. So in some ways, these are both a reflection of the desires of customers. Then we have technology options. If we have these requirements, what would we want to use? What types of engines? What type of material of the vehicle? For example, should it be steel? Should it be aluminum? Should it be magnesium? Should it be carbon-reinforced plastic? Should it be something else? What type of engine should it have? Should it have electrified engines? So maybe a mild hybrid or a full hybrid or a plug-in hybrid. What kind of fuel should it have? So these are all different technology choices which you need to assess against each other. And then there are business requirements. So what kind of profitability are we looking for? What's our return on investment target? What's our NPV, net present value, that we are trying to achieve? What kind of investment can we afford to make in this new vehicle? What kind of footprint would we like in terms of assembly plants spread all over the world? So the tool that we developed allows you to assess millions of these options and create charts that look like this, where you have some business metric on the y-axis, could be return on investment, and some functional attribute on the x-axis. So let's say it's fuel economy. So higher is good, and to the right is good. So what will happen is when you plot all of these, what you see is that very quickly you start finding that there's a frontier, which is called the Pareto frontier, if you've heard about that. The Pareto frontier is basically gives you the optimal value of the combination of things that you're looking at. So for example, if you have a target for a certain fuel economy on the x-axis, and you say, let's say that vertical line, the second vertical line, solid line, is 50 miles per gallon. That's what you're striving to achieve. You go up on that line and go to that point which is at the frontier. The combination of the options that gave you that value is the best that you can have in terms of return on investment. Why would you ever pick something that's below the line? And if you don't do this kind of work, and if you just a priori pick things, you are more likely than not to end up within the cloud rather than being at the top of the cloud. So this is the kind of tools that we developed using our business and engineering knowledge. The last slide I have on Ford is the strategy for the next generation of Ford's plug-in hybrid vehicles. As you know, hybrids are a very talked about segment of the vehicle market. Tesla has opened up a lot of doors for people in terms of electric vehicles, but there are also hybrids and many, many flavors of full hybrids, plug-in hybrids, etc. Ford currently has 6 vehicles, Ford Motor Company. 5 of them are within the Ford brand. 2 hybrids, the Fusion and the C-Max. 2 plug-in hybrids, Fusion and the C-Max, are fully electric, battery electric focus, and then a Lincoln MKZ hybrid electric vehicle. The challenge for Ford and other manufacturers is how to create this such that you still make money, because hybrids are more expensive and we don't sell as many of them. So one difference between Ford's approach and other manufacturers' approach is that Ford has actually used existing vehicles and then applied hybrid technology to them. So Fusion is available as a conventional gasoline vehicle also, same C-Max and the MKZ. However, if you look at a lot of the competition, for example, the Chevy Volt, Nissan Leaf, Tesla Model S, these are on BMW i3 or i8. These are dedicated vehicles that are actually built around the electrified powertrain. So there are pluses and minuses of both approaches. If you do a custom platform, then it's very expensive. However, you have to make fewer trade-offs for the attributes. But if you package it within existing vehicles, it's cheaper. You can spread the cost across multiple vehicles, but you're constrained by the space that's available to you. So we looked at the differences between all of these approaches. So why did I leave Ford? By this time, I had convinced myself that I wanted to make a bigger difference. And something that had been on my mind for almost a decade was what I call sustainable mobility. I'm very passionate about helping people move in a way that minimizes their carbon footprint. And actually, Ford's story was the one that inspired me to move along this path. If we look at personal mobility in the 20th century, it was about affordability. Before Henry Ford came along, cars were made by hand, by artisans, and they were toys of the rich. Common people could not afford cars. Henry Ford changed all of that in 1908 by introducing the Model T, in 1914 by introducing the moving assembly line, and then very quickly afterwards offering $5 per day wages to his workers so they could actually afford to buy the products that they made, reducing the length of the average workday from 9 hours to 8, etc. So there were lots of innovations that Henry Ford made that actually catapulted Ford Motor Company to be the #1 company in the world with more than 60% market share by 1921. And during this time, Ford took out this ad in the Saturday Evening Post on January 24th, 1925, with the caption, "Opening the highways to all mankind." Not to the rich, not to people of a specific country, not to a certain ethnicity, gender, but to everybody. And that, to me, is a very inspirational viewpoint coming from a company that was at the top of its game at that time. And it was all about making mobility affordable. And the words that are in this ad are actually very inspiring. I don't have time to go into them, but if you Google "Opening the Highways to All Mankind," you'll see this poster. I will encourage you to read this about the humility with which Ford speaks of his vision and the task and responsibility that he feels towards making mobility affordable to everybody. So if you look at this poster, it's a young couple standing on a cliff, looking down on highways teeming with cars and factories that are, very active and creating prosperity for all, which is a really idyllic and great viewpoint for 1925. But if you look at it from our eyes today, you will see clogged highways, congested roads where people are just stuck, not going anywhere, and factories spewing smoke and CO2, which is making the planet warmer. So the challenge for us in the 21st century is not one of affordability, but of sustainability. How do we make mobility sustainable such that we don't have that much of a negative impact on our planet? And there are actually 7 different elements of making mobility sustainable. The challenges that we have, these are called the grand challenges. First is tailpipe emission. So when you burn gasoline, out comes carbon monoxide, unburned hydrocarbons, nitric oxides, particulate matter, which is soot, and lead in countries that still use lead. And I was actually surprised to find that there are 6 countries in the world today that still use leaded fuel. Then greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, we know that climate change is real and global warming is happening. So what do we do about reducing it through automotive emissions? Then there are many challenges related to traffic, whether it's accidents that motor vehicles cause, noise that transportation creates, and then congestion that is caused by motor vehicles going everywhere. There was actually a traffic jam in China close to Beijing 3 or 4 years ago that lasted for 13 days. People were just stuck for 13 days, not going anywhere. And then there are social issues related to mobility, the divide between the haves and the have-not. And it isn't just between poor and rich countries, it's between people of a country. For example, even in our own country here, the mobility opportunities that are available to people who live in urban areas and rural areas are much less than they are to people who live in the suburbia. So there's a lot of inequality or inequity in the way people move. And if you look at developing countries, in many African countries, women have to walk for miles to get basic amenities like water. So they don't have access to mobility. So these are the challenges that we have, and we need to address them. So while I was pondering about these issues, I came across a little company here in Durham called Organic Transit, which makes the Elf, which is a hybrid between a bicycle and a car. And essentially what this vehicle is it is a 3-wheeled vehicle which has a solar panel on the top, which charges a battery, which can then drive a motor. So you can actually go all electric, and the vehicle is light enough that you can pedal it also. So we used to say that it's a car that runs on sunshine and on human calories, both of which are free and abundantly available. And it also has many car-like features. So you see a body. It's made of Trilon plastic, which is the material out of which kayaks are made. So it's extremely rigid. So it protects you from the elements and also keeps you safe on the roads. It has headlights, brake lights, and tail lights. It has a cargo compartment. Now it has doors. So there's features of both cars and bicycles in this, and it's designed to be legally classified as a bicycle, so you can actually take it on bike paths. And I joined Organic Transit as a general manager. My responsibility was in all aspects of the company's operation, from manufacturing, marketing and sales, to operations, manufacturing, supply chain, finance, HR, legal, engineering, service, and partnerships. So here I was moving from a large company with very specialized skills to doing a lot of work where the MBA training really helped in being able to look at and address all of these challenges together. And my goal was really very clear. It was to lead the transition from a startup to a growth company, which means standardizing and stabilizing the company. And it requires a lot of cultural change when you're trying to do it, because the entrepreneur's mentality is to make quick changes. Do something and get it out into production. But when you want to make hundreds and thousands of the same, you don't want to be tinkering with changes as you're building them. You want to make the change, verify it, standardize it, and then not have to worry about these failure modes escaping into the customer's hands. So during this time, we grew revenue by 81%, the year that I was with Organic Transit, increased unit sales by 15%, and reduced cost of goods sold by 8%. And the best part of actually working there was with the dozens of bright young students who were interns with us, and many of them from the MEM program here during the summer of 14 and the early part of 15. And we also started many partnerships, including domestic and international dealerships. So while I was working 80-plus hour weeks for more than a year, I realized that my ability to make a difference was being limited by the environment in which I found myself. And the energy that was going into the company was not resulting in the output that I was seeking. There were many reasons for this, and most of them were outside my control. So I decided to start my own company so that I could have much more control over the way I could do things. So I started Engineering Innovation, which is a consulting practice focused on sustainability. As Dr. Murray mentioned at the beginning, alternative energy, mainly alternative fuels, new technology development, and scaling up startups. These are all areas that I'm very passionate about and quite experienced in through my career and training. And this was really an opportunity for me to apply everything I had learned so far as an engineer and as a manager into building my own company. And the great thing, or the great challenge of working for yourself is that you do everything. There is nobody to give orders to. You decide what you name the company. It's my choice. With my family's input, I chose Engineering Innovation. The logo itself, it's a gear that's opening doors. One door is green, sustainable, and also a power button. So it's on as green, and it's opening doors. So that's just our way of expressing what we thought we wanted the company to convey. But there's a real great sense of pride in doing your own thing. And currently I have 3 projects that I'm working on. One is funded by a major R&D organization within the RTP area. One is funded by a major philanthropic foundation, and one is funded by a major automaker. And I'm sure you can guess what that automaker is. So one advice in making career transitions is never to burn bridges if you can afford to. The reason Ford is a client now is because I did not burn bridges while I left. I left on very good terms with them, and I explained to them the reasons why I was leaving. So this is something to keep in mind as you move through your careers. So, like I said at the beginning, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about consulting as a career because that's something I'm involved in right now. So first, let's define who a consultant is. So I found a really good definition in a book that I would recommend if you're interested in consulting or doing solo consulting. It's called The $1 Million Consulting, the Professional's Guide to Growing a Practice by Dr. Alan Weiss. And he's written a bunch of books, like 35 or so, on different aspects of consulting. And there's one called The Consultant's Bible, if you're interested in that. So he defines a consultant as someone who provides value through specialized expertise, content, behavior, skill, or other resources to assist a client in improving the status quo in return for mutually agreed upon compensation. The key point is that the consultant must improve the client's condition. So if you're not measurably improving the client's condition, then you're not really doing your job as a consultant. And the thing to keep in mind is that it's about business results and output, not methodologies or inputs. A lot of consultants then sell 5-point or 20-point plans that they have. It's not about those things. It's about the results that you can accomplish for your client. And it's really about bringing something of value to the party that justifies a fee above and beyond the client's normal business investment. Otherwise, they'll do it themselves. Why would they hire you? If you cannot create value for them that is above and beyond what they would get otherwise, there's no reason for them to hire you. And a consultant must deliver value added to the client, and that's the key metric. So to be successful as a consultant, 3 things must happen. 3 paths must converge. First is there must be a need, a market need for what you're trying to sell. You may be the world's best in something, but if nobody really cares about it, only you or your family will be happy with that. You must be very competent in what need you're trying to fulfill. Expertise, there is no substitute for expertise and competency. And the third thing is really critical, it's passion. You must have passion for what you're doing. And all three must be present. You can't do with just two of them. And especially passion cannot be learned. You can't go to school to learn passion. You can learn the other two, but you cannot learn passion. You have to feel it. So if you decide to become a consultant, or actually in any career that you choose, be sure that what you're trying to do is something that comes from within you, something that drives you to get out of bed and get to work, not something that wants you to press the snooze alarm on your alarm clock. Getting started as a consultant, it's a great challenge that you have to overcome. When you are just new, starting out, there's nobody paying your paychecks, you have to go out and convince people to give you a job to do. And so how do you do it? And so networking, it's a cliche, but networking is really key in almost everything that you will do, whether it's to find a job with a conventional employer or to find an assignment from a client. And to do that is to reach out to people that you have worked with in the past because they knew you, or have somebody who knows you refer you to somebody else. Because that's really how people hire consultants these days. They don't read ads, they don't go to websites to give you employment. And the other thing that I did that has helped is volunteering, to be a judge, a mentor, or a coach. So an opportunity came my way when I was thinking of becoming a consultant to help a class of entrepreneurship class at UNC's Keenan Flagler Business School, where students were asked to come up with a business case, or actually create a business case, and go through all the steps within 6 weeks to launch a real company. So I along with many other people, volunteered as a coach. So doing so, I not only refresh my own skills in creating business cases, but also made connections with a lot of other coaches who are in a similar situation as me. The other thing is to build a reputation. The gold standard is a commercially published book, which of course is not something you can do right away as you're starting out as a consultant, but what you can do is publish online. And today it's really easy. You can publish on LinkedIn, you can publish on other social media. It's one way for people to get to know how you think. And above all, do good work. There is no substitute for good work because good work not only gives you immense satisfaction in what you're doing, but also gets you repeat business. As a consultant, your goal should be 80% of your business should come from your existing customers because that requires no investment in marketing. You just keep doing work for them. So I followed my own advice and co-wrote 5 articles on LinkedIn as I was thinking about starting my own consulting practice with a friend of mine, Justin Adams, who is also an MBA from the Ross School of Business. The first article, they are in chronological order starting from the bottom. And we gave ourselves 1 week to write each article so we wouldn't get busy in doing other things. The first one was love the problem, not the solution, how engineers can learn to understand customer needs first. So what happens is as engineers, we are taught to solve problems. And sometimes we fall so much in love with the solution that we forget that people would really not care about the solution if it does not address a problem that they have. So what we have to do first is to figure out what's the problem that we're trying to solve before we get too enamored by the solution that we have come up with. So in this article, we talked a lot about thinking differently, spending time with people who are different than us. So we encourage engineers to spend time with artists, hang out with them, see what their life is like, go to places which are going through a complete renaissance. Downtown Durham is a great example. Detroit was one for me when I was there. And see how people are rejuvenating these areas that have been in decay for a very long time. So the idea is to get out of the building and think differently. And then put yourself into your customer's shoes and see what is it that ails them? What is it that is coming in their way that you can solve? The second article was how to find a problem worth solving. So you can look inside into your own life and see what are some of the things that have bothered you whether it's the death of a family member from a disease, or it's something else, or some atrocity you have observed while you're growing up that you don't think has any place in this century. There's lots of ways to find problems worth solving. The main thing is that it should have a connection with you. You need to feel passionate about the problem and fall in love with it, and then completely try to solve it. The third article was on storytelling for innovation. Why telling a good story is critical to get investors to invest in your company. And here we used the example of President Kennedy, who gave a speech in 1962 exhorting the country to go to the moon by the end of the decade. And it was a literal moonshot, because at that time the moon was an unknown celestial body. We had just started going into space, and Kennedy had to convince a skeptical country and lawmakers to invest 5% of the country's R&D budget into this unknown thing. And the speech that he gave is really amazing in the way he spoke about the need to go there and how he convinced people to follow through. So we used that speech and took excerpts from it to make a case for how every entrepreneur needs to figure out. Charts and graphs and formula and tables are all very nice, but unless you hit people here in their heart with the story that you're telling on how it will solve the problems that they have, they will not be excited about what you're trying to do. The fourth article was on states of innovation that we came up with. So the first state is visionary innovation, where the company is really doing very well. Then there is risk-averse innovation, risk-aware innovation, and then Hail Mary innovation, where everything is lost and all you're doing is doing something to get out of it. Apple went through this in '97 when they hired Steve Jobs back. Ford went through it in the late 40s when it had lost everything after Henry Ford had passed away. But then Henry Ford II, the grandson, came on board and completely turned the company around. So we actually used Ford Motor Company as an example and showed how over its 100-plus year history, it has gone through all four stages of innovation. And the last article was on how risk aversion is a very dangerous game, especially for a large company, and how we can avoid that. This is my last slide. I know I'm running out of time. I would like to have some time for Q&A, but I think this will be important because this brings everything together. So what I've done is I've compared working for a large company. Let's say Ford is an example, but it's not necessarily Ford. But a company that has been in business for a long time, has billions or hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, has thousands of employees. So let's take that as the case for a large company. A startup is a company like, let's say, my experiences with Organic Transit, but I would say for the purpose of this chart, a company that makes something, so it has some capital needs that it needs to keep going, and it has, let's say, 15 to 20 employees, so there's some burn rate issues that it has to deal with. And then starting your own business, which, for me, it's a consulting company. The idea is you are the sole person for that business, and the capital needs are not that much because in this case it's consulting. The business could also be a startup based on how you look at it. Then I've looked at 9 criteria, arbitrarily picked. There are many more, and we can discuss that in Q&A if you're interested. A large company is really good for many reasons. So financial stability is one of them. You can be almost guaranteed that you will get your paycheck at the end of the month. You won't have to be on pins and needles worrying whether it will show up in your bank account. A startup is not necessarily so, especially a cash-constrained startup which has a huge burn rate. It's not necessary that you will not have issues related to getting your paycheck. Or not getting laid off because the company is in danger of running out of money. Now, this may not be true. In Silicon Valley, a lot of startups are very well capitalized, and they actually compete for talent with actually well-established companies. And a good example is Uber, which has actually hired away very well-paid engineers from all the major companies because it wants to get into certain areas of mobility. But in general, it's challenging from a financial perspective. And then having your own business, you have more control over cash flow, plus the cash outflow is not that high, so it's somewhere in the middle. Mentorship and guidance, especially as a young person starting out, I think large companies are structured to provide formal mentorship to new employees. Ford has a formal program called the Ford College Graduate Program, where you actually, when you're hired, you go through for 2 years different areas of the company where you will get targeted assignments that will expose you to different areas of the company, and you actually get a mentor assigned to you who will worry about your career development. In a startup, you can get mentorship, but it's outside the company typically. So if you're doing something that people care about, they will come and talk to you about that. Own business is similar. Work-life balance. Again, a large company typically has the resources to allow you to have work-life balance. So they will allow you to work from home if you so choose to. They will give you all the resources you need. They will allow you to have flexible work hours, etc. Startup, I put a negative. There is no life outside of work. It's work-work balance. It is because it's like having 10 babies at the same time. There's so much to do, and if one baby is sleeping, the other needs their diaper change, the third needs food, etc. So it really is an all-consuming affair. So you have to be very careful in a startup. And again, there are stages in your life when this is something you should do because the experience is invaluable, but you should be aware of the challenges that might come your way. Own business, the reason I put 3 stars, 3 pluses is because you are your own boss and you can decide when you want to go to work and when you want to go and play. Learning by osmosis is another good reason for working for a large company. Osmosis means absorbing things while just being around people. So I actually learned more at Ford by just being around people who are much smarter than I am and much more experienced. So everything I showed you on systems engineering was learned by talking to people who I was working with. And that's a great resource to have. It's not so in a startup because you're just so busy and there's not that many people around you. In our own business, it's somewhere in the middle. Learning by doing is the other way. In a startup, and if you have your own business, you do everything yourself. So you learn a lot by doing things, whether it's creating Excel charts or it's making coffee or taking out trash or whatever it is. Whereas in a large company, people get very specialized. And there is usually somebody or the other you can go and reach out to if you need an answer for something that's bothering you. Impact of work also I gave, plus does not mean negative. It just means if plus is positive, then the others are higher than that. So impact of work, I would say, is much greater than your own business because you can make the decisions that you feel are in the best interest of the company, of your company. Whereas in a large company, usually what happens is there are so many people that there's a lot of bureaucracy. And you go through committees and committees of discussions and you go back and then you go back to the seniors to make a decision. And it can be quite frustrating. Job satisfaction, for the same reason that I mentioned, if it's a plus for a large company, plus for a startup because of the impact that you're trying to make, it's 3 pluses for being your own boss. And then risk and reward. Large company, less risk, less reward. Startup, great risk, great reward. And own business, maybe not as risky, but very rewarding. Because again, you're doing it for yourself, and every moment that you put into it, it will reflect your own values and your own commitment. So that's it. I think, thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
When you introduced yourself, you mentioned that you graduated top of your class, and you also mentioned that you had a particular point of view about academics and professional life. I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, so academic excellence comes from really mastering the subjects that you're learning in class and showing that mastery in either tests that you take or projects that you do. So definitely it gives you a lot of confidence in yourself if you're at the top of your class, that you can match wits with the best and brightest around you. That confidence helps a lot in your career because you don't feel afraid when taking on new assignments. You have some sense of confidence in you. That's a plus. The ability to master things can also come back and help you a lot in the career. So for example, in my case, I'm working with a company where I had to go back and look up steam tables that I had seen in my undergraduate because they were working on a Rankine cycle. For those of you who are mechanical engineers, steam engines work on a cycle that I had read many years ago. But because I had paid attention then, it was easy for me to just go in and read up again and be conversant with it. So mastering something helps because it stays with you much longer. So those are the positives. The not so positive things are that real world success does not necessarily mean comes to the person who knows the most. It comes to the person who can impact people around them the most in thinking the way they think. So there's a lot of people skills involved, and if you sometimes get too academically focused, you don't develop those skills of influencing others around you to come to your point of view. And I think there's a trade-off. When you're all, there's only limited time in doing things, and I would encourage you to, of course, be very good in paying attention in what you're learning in class, because it may help you later, and then there won't be a professor or a TA helping you when you are working for a small company. You're on your own. So you either go back to your textbooks or you Google or you figure it out yourself. But I would also encourage you to not just focus on academic knowledge, but also on seeing how do you convince people around you to think the way you do. And that's actually where the MBA program really helped. I'm not sure if in your MEM program you have the case-based method and you do things as projects, as teams. That's really valuable. In engineering, most of your training is as an individual, whereas in business, it's more as a member of a team. And to be able to get people to think your way, I think is really important. And that's where, if you're very academically focused, you may fall short a little. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, as you intend to grow your company, you'll need to expand your team as well. So how do you build a team? What attributes do you see when you want to hire someone or want to get on board? And for them to be on the same platform as you are, how do you sell your vision as well?
Yeah, good question. So I think everybody, so what I will look for in a team member is a person who believes in doing things the way I do, who is in line with my vision for the company, who thinks of sustainability in the same passionate way that I do, and is also knowledgeable about what we are working on. So I would look for a strong team player, and also somebody who I can work with comfortably. So there's lots of things you can come up with in terms of who you would like, and also what the role would be. So as I grow the company, there will maybe need for analysts to do the work to set the stage, and then people who would synthesize that knowledge. So there will be different stages of people, of skills that will be required. But I think above all, apart from the technical skills, I will really look for people I can work with, who are easy to work with, and who would be more self-motivated to do the work without needing too much direction from me.
Just a follow-up question. How would you sell your vision to your potential hires or someone?
Selling the vision is really about communicating what you stand for with them and seeing how they react to what you're doing. So the projects that I've worked on, the things that I'm doing, I would ask them to look at them and give me feedback on that, and that will be a good way for me to know how sold they are on what I'm trying to do.
I couldn't help but notice that you had an LLC at the end of the firm. So how do you plan on funding the later stages of your firm? Because a startup wouldn't be interested in an LLC, I understand. And
so I'm not looking for...
I mean, a venture wouldn't be interested in an LLC. So what would be your funding plan for the next few years?
So I'm self-funded because I don't have any capital needs. I'm not building something. So if I was like Organic Transit, where I was actually, my inventory needs were big, and I was in a big warehouse where I was paying rent and I was hiring 20 employees without getting revenue in place, then I would need funding. In a consulting world, you're working for yourself. I will hire more people as I start getting more revenue. So I'm not planning on seeking funding for my company. The reason for the LLC is more it's the easiest way to incorporate a company without doing too much, without having to do too much bureaucratic work. There's S Corp, there's C Corp, there's others. So I talked to an accountant before I I created the LLC. It's the easiest thing right now from a tax purposes, from many other responsibilities point of view. But as we grow, we may look at S Corp or other ways of organizing us.
Talking about the transition and the changing of career that you've been having for the past of your life, I was just wondering if was that actually life plans or life goal that you have set up at your earlier age or at our age like this? You have already set a lot of goals, or just you found your passion along the way until now?
You mean, did I know when I started my career that I would go this way?
Yeah.
Or it just happened? That's a very good question. I did not know when I started that I would be starting my own company. I was very academically focused. When I first started at Ford, all I wanted to be was a good researcher. And then once I got there, I started realizing that there was much more than just doing research that I wanted to do. And that's the reason I volunteered to be in the Six Sigma program, where I actually worked in assembly plants, working on real problems that with assembly line workers were seeing. So no, it has evolved over time as my understanding of the world has changed, and my understanding of my own self has changed. So I did not have a grand vision, a grand plan when I was your age. I wanted to just do good work. I knew I wanted to be in the combustion area, sustainability, because that's something I cared about from a very long time. So air pollution and combustion. So that's why I went to Ford to work on the next generation of engines. But beyond that, I really didn't know much. One thing that may help you is to talk to people who have been through this. And like if I had a mentor at that age, maybe I would have thought earlier than I did. Yeah.
We'll make this the last question.
So the table that you showed with the comparison between working a large business, a startup, and owning a business, don't you think that your background and your long experience in the industry has influenced the pluses on owning a business as a consultant, or because owning a business meaning consultant or having a whole manufacturing line?
Absolutely.
So what's your feedback on that?
Yeah, very good point. So if owning your own business, you could also be a startup, the way I defined a startup. So you could be in that column too. So I define owning my business from my own experience as a consultant. And I've come to consulting very late or later in my career. So that's another thing to think about is, do you want to be a consultant starting out? Or do you want to gain the experience and make the contacts and have some money in your bank so that you don't have to go out begging for money to pay your rent as you become your own, as you start your own business? So those are the trade-offs you have to think about. When you're younger, you have much more energy. You don't have family restrictions or requirements, so you can give your heart and soul without anybody else being affected by it to what you're doing. So that's why a lot of companies are started by young people, because it's just the way things are for them. And it's actually interesting that a lot of companies are started by people who are in their 60s, 50s or 60s, because in the middle years, you're just so busy taking care of your family. Or you want the financial security to be able to take care of your family, even if you have the ability to spend time on it. So yes, this is based on my experience, but if you really want to think of your business as a startup, just think of the startup column.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just one last thing, my email is here. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask me afterwards, please feel free to send me an email. My LinkedIn profile you can find also. Send me an invite, and so that way also you can correspond with me. And I wish you all the very best. You are very bright people, I know from personal experience, and I hope that you guys will make a good career for yourselves.
Thank you.